Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and esteemed participants. A warm welcome to the Roundtable on Artificial Intelligence for National Competitiveness. I request you all to please find your seats as we are about to commence our insightful journey into the realm of artificial intelligence. Request you to kindly carry your cup of tea and join us here on the roundtables. I would like to request all our panelists onto the dais, please. Mr. Ili Bayraktari, President and CEO, Special Competitive Studies Project, USA. Welcome. Mr. T.P. Chopra, Co-Chairman of the CII AI Forum, President and CEO, BLP Group India. Please come up on stage. Mr. Dilip Sani, Managing Director, Rockwell India. We have with us Professor Dheeraj P. Sharma, Director from IIM Rohtak, and we have Mr. Pranjal Sharma, well-known economic analyst and author, and Dr. Shuktit Singh Rao, Executive Director, CII. I welcome all of you to this roundtable on AI for national competitiveness. To set the tone for today's discussion, let's begin with the welcome remarks. I would like to invite Dr. Shuktit Singh Rao. I would like to invite Dr. Shuktit Singh Rao, Executive Director, CII Digital, to kindly give the welcome remarks and moderate this roundtable thereafter. Thank you.
Is it working? Hi. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to CII Roundtable on AI for National Competitiveness. We all know that AI today stands in front of us as a transformative force. And it's high time that we not only embrace it, we leverage it for the nation's security and competitiveness. CII has been driving a mission to increase the adoption of AI in the country and elsewhere. In this regard, we have today's discussion in partnership with SCSP. I'm delighted to have a wonderful panel here, and delighted to have such distinguished gathering of industry leaders. To begin with, I invite Ili to make his opening comments to make us understand what is SCSP about, how does it relate to national competitiveness, how does AI relate to national competitiveness?
Thank you so much, Shuktit, for that introduction. I want to really thank CII for organizing this event in partnership with the Special Competitive Studies Project. My name is Ili Bayraktari. I lead and I founded a Special Competitive Studies Project. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what is the project about. In 2018 and 19, United States Congress created a commission to focus on artificial intelligence and the purpose of artificial intelligence for national security reasons. I think the reason why they did the commission was that they saw two things happening in our country. Number one is everything they were hearing in 2018 and 19 from Silicon Valley was that there's a powerful technology coming and we should get ourselves ahead of it and get ourselves organized. And then the second reason why they created the commission was that everything coming out of China was a serious concern for our members of Congress. In 2017, 18, 19, you saw China that had a clear strategy. They wanted to be a global AI leader by 2030. They invested enormous resources towards executing that strategy, and they executed, and then they had a top-down approach in how they were executing their mission. So with that in mind, our Congress created the AI Commission. I was fortunate to serve as the executive director. The commission was comprised of 15 well-renowned individuals in our society, leaders from the private sector, CEOs of some of our most famous companies, leaders from the academic world, and former high-level government officials. The job of the commission was for 2.5 years really first to do an assessment of where are we as a country, namely United States, in terms of AI adoption, and secondly, what are the sets of steps we have to undertake to stay ahead and stay as a leader in terms of artificial intelligence. Mind you, this was all happening before the release of ChatGPT. So we looked at more broadly what AI means. So we look at the talent we need, the immigration policies. We looked at semiconductors, which resulted in the CHIPS Act that was adopted by our country. And then, in October of 2021, when we disbanded the commission, because commissions are short-lived in our system, and they have limited resources, we created a special competitive studies project. This is an out-of-government project, so none of us work for the government. But the one thing I saw during the AI Commission is that technology is happening in private sector. The private sector is leading with this technology. Long are the days when government and government labs were in charge of innovation, like we had during the Cold War in our system. So one thing I saw is, how do we have a whole-of-nation approach to national competitiveness? How do we bring private sector, academia, and government under one roof and set a pathway for the United States with allies and partners to stay ahead in critical technology? Because as you all see now, this decade is a decisive decade. You have two forces happening at the same time. You have a geopolitical world reordering with China and a set of countries leading the autocratic bloc, and technology and a set of technologies, namely developed and fully charged by China, so they can overcome the disadvantage they have in this space. So we created SCSP because we thought a body like this can bring together all these communities together, namely whole of nation, to remain nationally competitive for AI and other emerging technologies. I'm here in India now because I've spent 2 years in the Pentagon working in the US-India defense relationship. I remember flying with Secretary Panetta in India when he announced the creation of DTTI, and probably some of the companies here represented were part of the DTI, Defense Trade and Technology Initiative, that really sought to remove barriers between the defense sector here and defense sector in America and deepen that relationship because of the growing national security risks. So me and my team here were part of the US-India forum that happened over the weekend, where there's a general enthusiasm for where the relationship between our countries are going. I also believe that India has a tremendous opportunity to seize the AI moment and become an AI great power in the years to come. I appreciate CII's willingness to co-organize this together because I wanted to share my thoughts and my team's thoughts with you and enjoy the conversation with the fellow panelists here. So I'll stop there, Shridhar.
Thank you, Lee, and a very warm welcome to you and to your team from SCSP. Thank you so much for your participation here. So, Lee, firstly, I'll come back to you later because I would request each of our panelists to give opening remarks, and then I'll come back to you and talk about how India and US can work together and leverage AI for common good. Next, I would like to invite Mr. T.P. Chopra, who is the co-chair for AI Forum for CII. He's also the MD and president of the BLP Group. TP, your opening comments on how AI can relate to national competitiveness. How do you see its importance in terms of creating, prominence for a nation, utilizing this as a technology?
Great. No, thanks so much, Shuktaj, and great to see everybody out here. And I think especially organizing this session on one of the most critical topics in the world today. My colleague Pranjal and I were together at Davos last week, and if there was just one word in Davos, it was AI. It was just about everywhere. Sessions, most of the sessions and discussions were about AI and how important it is. I think there's no doubt that we in India have to this is going to be a critical topic for us to discuss about, given how important this is going forward. I'll just give you a quick introduction about myself and why I'm here and why this whole topic is so important to me. From my perspective, one of our group companies is Industry.ai, where we use a lot of AI to drive productivity, safety, quality, sustainability in manufacturing and infrastructure assets around India. So we work in airports. For example, at Bangalore Airport, we're running the entire airport with Vision AI, but it just shows how critical it was over the last 2 years the importance from a security perspective and a safety perspective when you use such technologies in large infrastructure assets like this. For example, we use similar technologies in power transmission, whether it is in terms of factory floors, on how do you make auto factories perform better, or pharmaceutical factories perform better, and therefore the intent and the importance of security and the importance in terms of making sure we have the right architecture and making sure we have the right security enhancements is absolutely critical. I will just end by just saying this. At another session, we had another professor from Singapore talk about the top 50 AI companies in the world, and he shared the fact that there wasn't even a single Indian company in that top 50. However, I did mention to him that I'm sure the CEO in all these top 50 AI companies in the world, there must be an Indian at the top or an Indian in the number 2 position. But I feel the speed at which we in India have to develop these technologies is going to be critical. And I think we have a very, very a unique position given the push on manufacturing in infrastructure for us to take the lead in deploying these technologies going forward.
Thank you, TP. Next, I invite Dilip Sani, MD of Rockwell India. Dilip, you had an organization that has been driving industrial automation across the world. So I invite you to make your opening remarks on how do you see AI playing a role in this direction.
Sure. Thank you so much. And first of all, glad to be here and part of this panel. And Yuli, welcome to India, to you and your team. So really a couple of things. Let's just pull the camera back and look at what's going on and where is India at. Last year, we broke into top 5 economies globally. We are well and truly on a pathway to be number 3 in terms of size of our GDP. And that should happen sooner rather than later over the next handful of years. But we are also stuck at a point where manufacturing, though it is growing, has been kind of like stuck. We've hit some sort of a glass ceiling at the mid-teens of the GDP. It's growing, but it's not able to break through and become, say, 20 to 25% what our policymakers would like it to be. And for that to happen, right? For that to happen, you cannot just extrapolate what has gotten us here, right? The complexity of managing manufacturing competitiveness, since we are talking about competitiveness today, right? In a world which is increasingly a lot more sensitive to sustainability concerns, availability of natural resources, human resources, etc., and the list of challenges goes too long, right? It's plain and simple that to manage through all that complexity and then to break through and create that $1 trillion manufacturing sector, it is not going to happen till the time you really rely on the power of some of these new age technologies, and AI and increasingly Gen AI presents some of those possibilities which can give us the fillip to proceed ahead. Now, I would just end by giving a couple of data points, and Shakti, I'll make my comments more focused on manufacturing, if that's okay, right? One, the pace at which we've seen skepticism, which there still is, around the user base translate into willingness to experiment, willingness to commit, carry out changes within their organizations to absorb these technologies. The time taken within our own, this ecosystem within India, that's been astonishingly short. And manufacturing practitioners are usually, they're not easy people to convince, but at this point in time, they're very interested and excited about trying out, right? That's point number one. Point number two is, if you really look at it, TP, since you spoke about Davos, right? The number of WEF lighthouses that are turning up in India, meaning factories which are getting the lighthouse status, I think it's at an amazing pace. So that means that interest is getting translated into something which is being acknowledged globally. So we are putting out between 4 to 6 to maybe more number of lighthouses each year. And that's been quite amazing if you compare and contrast with some of the same sort of countries that we vie for investment. So it's that change is beginning to happen. We're feeling very excited about it, and the role and the contribution, Shakti, of these technologies, right, in the industrial setting, in very brownfield industrial settings to transform the status quo is quite promising.
Thank you, Dilip. Next, I invite Professor Dheeraj Sharma. He's director of one of the largest IIMs in India, IIM Rohtak. Professor Dheeraj, if I may ask you that, there is so much of discussion going on AI. We are, any corner of the earth you go, there is a discussion like this going on AI, right? But from an individual's point of view, from a human being's point of view, how do you see this interaction or the impact of this technology to an individual? And then how do you see it impacting the economy as a whole? So with that, may I invite you to make your opening comments?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation first, and welcome to India again. You see, I was just sharing my thoughts prior to coming here. For us to grow, I mean, there is no choice but to grow. So you have to find mechanisms of growth. In management, we call it Red Queen hypothesis. If you've read the book Alice in Wonderland, they say you have to run as fast as you can to stay at the same place. So we have to run, which means we need growth. And growth will come from innovation, some sort of innovation, something. So we anticipate that every generation, which is about 25-year period, we must have a disruptive innovation. AI is that sort of a disruptive innovation which is likely to transform the way we function. Disruptive innovation is the innovation which changes the way we function, our life changes. With that, there are two aspects of it. One, are the innovations faster than human adaptation? So from an individual standpoint, will we accept those things which you are going to proffer? I'll quote a book, one of the best written books on this domain called Technopoly by Neil Postman. He says, we have technology driving us, we are not driving the technology. Again, AI's acceptance for human beings at what pace is something that needs more scientific inquiry, and I would say that requires for us to understand how quickly, you may be able to produce something almost immediately, or offer a service or a product, but the human aspect of its acceptance and then also pursuing it is something that needs. As far as the economy is concerned, there are already reports that AI will add more than 1% to Indian economy in the next few years. There are a number of reports. The figure ranges anywhere between 0.8% to 1.7%. If we take a safe bet, at least 1% to the economy can be added in Indian context from AI and AI-based products. Again, I would like to draw attention to the strategy document, which already Government of India has one, on AI, which talks about various sectors, which would be the focus of AI. And primary sector amongst them would be logistics, supply chain, healthcare, agriculture, among others. There are 5 sectors. I can't really remember off the top of my head which were those, but these are the primary ones: logistics, supply chain, and this impact is largely in the domain of efficiency improvement. We are really not certain in academic world right now the effectiveness. Now there are 2 separate parts of growth, efficiency and effectiveness. The efficiency, certainly we know you could be more efficient. Whether you'll be more effective is something that again needs some scientific investigation. There are significant challenges which I may just note down already. US has already identified some of them, because for them I think the biggest challenge would be the China, as you mentioned, and so easiest way would be to block, and block, but recently the 3 biggest companies in US in the AI domain have signed an agreement to use watermark in AI-based products. Because one of the most important outcomes of AI is anonymity, and that really puts a damper on the smorgasbord of everybody who wants to hold somebody accountable for what's been done. So identification and, I would say responsibility is going to be a significant challenge going forward. Who do you hold responsible and who will be accountable and who will be identified? So already a step has been taken. This is very recent. I think a month or two ago, there's the top 3 companies, which is OpenAI and so on and so forth. They've signed an agreement to have watermarks to identify that this is AI-generated outcome. These are very important. In 2022, the Biden administration were the first ones to look at even exports of the AI-based products, and they had come up with a policy and vis-a-vis China. All these are going to be very, very important determinants of the actual impact of AI on Indian economy, because it's no longer just India in isolation. It's game theoretic on how things play out between US and China. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dheeraj. Pranjal, if I may come to you. Pranjal Sharma, ladies and gentlemen, famous author, economic thinker, independent thinker, widely speaks around the world. And so Pranjal, as an independent thinker, as an advisor, as an economic advisor, and as somebody who's been studying and writing a lot about the impact of technology that we are facing, what are your views on what we are discussing? How do you look at the economic impact of technology like AI on nations? And do you foresee that there would be a change in relative positioning of countries or economies as a result of the impact of AI on the world?
Thanks for inviting me and to be with this panel of extreme practitioners and leaders in their domains. I will give a perspective from perhaps civil society. One is that, if you look at national security and national strength, it used to be what kind of arms and tanks and bombs you had, right? It has moved on to, then it moved on to what kind of energy resources you had. Energy security was your national security. Then geopolitical alliances was your national security. Today, technology is your national security. So competitiveness is actually folded under that. If you do not think of national security, then competitiveness has to be part of that. If we look at competitiveness, then I would also add that it's not going to, we have to go a level below. Every company, every institution, I would say, whether it's a non-profit, whether it's a government agency or a for-profit organization, everybody has to use AI for their own organizational competitiveness. If there's a government body which has to deliver citizen welfare in the most efficient manner, they have to use AI. And you see examples of that in India. A company like TP's, renewable energy, but using AI in the most efficient manner possible. Without AI, TP will tell you later, his company's efficiency and competitiveness would be, much, much lower. Same with what is being done at Rockwell, the way they're using AI to improve competitiveness for themselves and for their clients. The point is that national competitiveness will be a factor of the agglomeration of all organizations using AI to become far more competitive. From a citizen's perspective, the country, like India, has to also maintain tech sovereignty. We cannot be dependent on other countries, overly dependent. Yes, there can be partnerships and collaborations, but any country today cannot afford to have somebody else hold leverage over them on technology. All of you would remember, especially Shuktij, CII team would remember in the 70s and 80s, it was all about tech transfer. You keep begging for technologies to be transferred to so-called developing countries. Today, AI is actually a very egalitarian option. Everybody has similar access. The question is how much talent and effort you put into it to develop your own strength. So I'll pause here with the closing point that national competitiveness is embedded into organizational competitiveness, and AI is a very basic standard today. It's not something that has to be alien to organizational models.
Thank you, Pranjal. So, Ili, coming back to you, you lead an organization which has been actively studying and researching and trying to put into practice how technologies can be utilized for nation building or national security and stuff like that. And now you're here in India and you're you and your team as a part of the India-US forum, and you've been into multiple deliberations, and you are seeing this engagement between US and India going on for some period and transitioning. How do you look, how is AI playing a role in weaving together the relationship of co-working between the two countries, India and US, and how do you see this going forward?
Thank you so much. I think really AI is that ripe technology for US and India to take their relationship to the next level. And why do I say that? When you look at the history of the US-India relationship, it has been evolving for the last couple of years. It has evolving, we're moving in the right direction, but I think technology is that glue that has kept it together and accelerated it. When you look at the people-to-people connections, the relationship there is at probably the best that it ever existed. If you look at the company-level relationship, the relationship is there. When you look at the capabilities of software companies in India and their relationship with software companies in the United States, that is also at the highest level possible. When you look at the talent that exists here, and probably the talent that America is using from the talent being developed in India, as we mentioned earlier, probably the top companies are run by either Indian born leaders, CEOs, or Indian Americans, that have been educated in the United States. So I think the ground is there for US and India to take the relationship, especially focusing on AI, to the next level. What are the areas of improvement that I would focus on? I think when you break down the AI is constituted of data, algorithms, and hardware. On the data side, I think, with enough guardrails in place, in protecting privacy, civil liberties, using AI in a responsible way, I think both countries can find a way to benefit from AI. When you look at the algorithms, this is really easy because either your companies will excel here and become at the forefront of AI, or a combination of US and American companies will lead the way. But on the hardware side, I think this is where India lacks a little bit. And that's why I would like to focus here, because I think for United States, this is an area that we identified 3 years ago, that the outsourcing of manufacturing to China, and especially to Taiwan, of cutting-edge semiconductors, became a weakness for us to lead in the space. So then what did the United States do? They passed a legislation called the CHIPS Act that aims to invest $52 billion to build fabs, as they say, in the United States. So at least for the cutting-edge technologies in semiconductors, they are in single-digit nanometers. Those will be produced, designed, and manufactured in the United States. I think India is waking up to that challenge. I think the Micron investments is a step in the right direction. But the speed and scale that India has in manufacturing is really a fertile ground for these kind of hardware systems to be built in India. And chips are the first wave, because I think when you look at the next wave of AI technologies, you see robotics. I think that's a natural progression of how large language models with robotics will be giving us the next wave. So when I think about hardware, I not only think just chips, I think about robotics, drones, all the things that will provide us the next wave of national competitiveness and edge in the national security. So I'll stop there. I hope this answers, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think two countries that will define probably this century are the United States and India. And I think when it comes to AI can provide that strategic partnership to move both our societies, our economies, in an accelerated way in this decade and this century.
Thank you, Ili. TP, you've heard the view coming from Ili, and you've been around the world, and you're thickly, in the center of things in the Indian industry. When a common man looks at this, issue of AI everywhere in India, one tends to think that, on one side you have these global standards, on the other side you have a lot of local problems to solve, right? And On the other hand, we are seeing some kind of resurgence of India as a country, becoming a center of focus. And, at least this much can be said that, in the AI story today, India is sitting somewhere in the center. And there are partnerships like the one we are trying to forge with US, and there are so many other countries that, we are looking at. What are your views on how Indian industry can leverage this moment? What are the important things that Indian industry should not miss doing at this point of time? Because, the moment is there, but the moment will not stretch forever, right? The tide will go away after a certain time. How do we make most of the moment that we are in right now?
No, thanks a lot for that, Shuktej. I think, Ili, you raised a very, very good point. I like the way you said it about the data, the algos, and the hardware. What I tell everybody in the world of technology, I just know very little, but the customer doesn't care where you get the technology from as long as you provide the solution. In my world, what does the CEO say? TP, I want to improve revenue by 5%. I want to improve quality. I want to reduce cost. I want to improve safety on the factory floor by 5%. So that's all he cares about. How we actually provide that to the customer, he doesn't care. So I'll give you a good example of how we need the cooperation of different players in the ecosystem to come together to provide this solution. So again, going back to the Bangalore airport where we've connected 500 cameras to do Vision AI. Now to make that happen, we had to get the servers from Dell. We used NVIDIA's GPU chips and NVIDIA's framework. And we continue to work with Cisco networks and routers to make all that connectivity happen. So that's what we need to do to just do one project. In some projects, we work with Rockwell. In some projects, we work with a whole variety of companies, whether it's Honeywell, whether it's a variety of other US companies in the technology space. Obviously, from the cloud side, we work out here with Sundar in terms of AWS, with Microsoft, and Google to actually get the cloud. So my point being is it needs a collaborative approach across the world, whether it's in terms of the three critical elements, like Eli, you said, data, algos, and hardware. I'll focus on the first two because on the hardware side, I think everybody knows about the really focus by the government to ensure we really accelerate the hardware side of it. I think on the data and the algo side, we in India have an incredible opportunity for a couple of reasons. One, we have the 1.4 billion people, we are generating vast, vast amounts of data. And we could actually leverage that data, point number one. Point number two is, in my world of the industrial world, we are getting vast amounts of industrial data. What do I mean? Vibration, pressure, temperature, flow, from gas turbines, steam turbines, wind turbines, CNC machines, Makino machines, Siemens machines. So we're getting a variety of this data. So what we started thinking was, if we can use this data, overlaying it with generative AI, let's see what the outcome is. And it's been fantastic to see the results out of it. So what we did was we took all this industrial data, we took some historical maintenance data, SAP and Oracle data, put it into what I call a closed box. So I call it, rather than open AI, I call it closed AI, because no CEO wants to give away his data or give access to that data to anybody else. So we coined this word closed AI, we put it into a box, and we give the CEO the ability to access relevant data using generative AI. Now what we are seeing is the outcome using GPT-4 versus 3.5 is significant. We're seeing a big improvement. Google gave us Gemini to play with, and we're using that as well now to test these models. So coming back to the data and the algo side, people call generative AI, they call them LLMs. We coined a new word called MLMs, machine language models. So what if we take all this machine data and see what the output is in terms of using generative AI on the industrial world? I'll just end on the other point, to your point, Shuktej, that I think we in India have to take the lead in this space. We can't afford to be left behind. Well, it's going to take a lot of navigation of the use of these new technologies. I'll give you a good example. The obvious one was that using generative AI to create a tool to book tickets for travel. But we actually found that to be quite a big failure in some cases. Why? Because when we started applying it, when you want to buy a ticket, if you just tell the computer, find me the cheapest ticket, that's easy. But there are a lot of other variabilities that go into deciding, do I want to go with a Vistara flight or Indigo flight exactly at the same time and exactly at the same price? But where we're seeing huge applications is in manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, where today pharmacies and medicines are designed by trial and error. You take some chemicals and mix it. Can we use generative AI to use pharmaceuticals by design or medicine by design rather than just having this iterative approach? Or can we apply it in terms of healthcare, in terms of transcriptions? So I think the application, writing code, today humans write the code and the computer checks it. Can we have a world where we actually change it around, where the computer writes the code and the humans check it? So I think all these areas, with regards to the data and the algo part, I think there could be a huge transformation and lead that India can take in these two areas.
Thank you, TP. Dilip, one question which is quite pertinent is that while in different discussion forums and various government-to-government dialogues, it is like everybody agrees that, okay, AI adoption should be, higher and higher and higher. But when it comes to the ground, because you have a direct view of how the Indian industry is responding to the adoption of technologies like AI, how do you see, is the speed of AI adoption in India, is it the right speed? If it is not the right speed, what can be done to drive the adoption faster?
That's a great question, Shaktij. And I think the answer is a two-part answer. The interest, the dialogues, the amount of time that CXOs are devoting is getting higher. At the same time, and we have Pranjal on the panel, and he's done a lot of research for his recent book, a very high percentage of digital transformation undertakings, land up in unsuccessful attempts, or they barely scratch the surface. And the reason for that is not technology. The reason for that is, how do you identify technology and translate that into business benefits? And that transcends the technology realm, that transcends into how do you make the change stick? How do you make the change human-centric? How do you collaborate not just with the people who are conversant with the technology, are aware of it? How do they come together to work with people who are actually going to be practicing the use of that technology, or people who are adept at the process elements of it, right? So it's all about collaboration. It's all about translating it into impacting business and making it stick. Now, coming to India, I think India is really no different from what our firm has experienced, both in our home markets as well as markets globally, is a lot of digital transformation journeys get started with a lot of gusto, right? But they usually don't, they end up in what we started calling over the last handful of years as the pilot purgatory, right? You do POCs and that really go nowhere, and then people become disillusioned and disenchanted and so forth. What we are beginning to see now is people are already talking about, there's no value in a POC because as a concept, it is already proven. Let's just talk about, is there proof of value in those undertakings? So again, the dialogue is moving from what is this technology to, is there value for the business in that technology? And is there proof of scale, meaning can I apply it here, but then can I roll this out across the organization? So Shaktij, we are at that stage right now, right? We feel that, and the industry is waking up to the reality that the value at stake is immense, right? We start our conversations with industrial users. If we have no great use case, we encourage people to start talking about tackling unscheduled downtime, right? That itself is like a treasure trove of value. If you can really dig deeper and figure out what is causing you to have abrupt stoppages in your production processes, right? And these new technologies that TP just spoke about, right? They open up great vistas, right? Of new insights. And once you have the insights, it's easy to then think about doing something with those insights. And you're beginning to now get earlier alerts, sometimes up to several minutes to hours in advance of an impending shutdown event, which for a production professional is it's gold mine, right? So we are at that point where the businesses are evaluating what's the value in it, right? And can I roll it out at scale? People are going with an approach which is minimum viable, right? So let's just implement something, see if it sticks, as opposed to just testing the worth of the technology, which is well proven, right? And we are seeing, I think, brownfield settings. It's a good thing when you're setting up a new greenfield facility, which there is a lot of going on in India, right? And that's great. But there is immense value in getting started with the factories that you've already got. But you got to be very, very conversant with how that change impacts the human, and how that how putting the human in the middle gives you transformationally different outcomes. Right? So I'll just leave it that.
Yeah. Thank you, Dilip. Coming to Professor Dheeraj, you mentioned in your opening comments that AI is one of the disruptive innovation technologies or disruptive technologies that the world is seeing today. Now, one of the things that happen whenever there is a technology which is used to create a disruptive innovation, one of the outcomes is generally that the market leaders get, jumbled up, and then you find there are new market leaders who come in. Now, do you foresee that the impact of AI on the industry, number one, and then on the countries, number two, on the economies as well? Do you foresee that post this wave, the world would see a different, world leaders than the ones that we have today? I mean, your views on that, please.
I'll start with a very rudimentary example. When you mentioned leaders, I mean, now we have deep fakes available, which can actually create a demigod at any point in time and speak with you. These are all challenges which we would experience. But I think the idea what you are conveying was conveyed in a speech. There was a speech made by the Prime Minister in Raise 2020, I think almost 3 years ago, which talked about responsibility. Now, kindly indulge me for a few seconds. When you're driving a Tesla and you are in an autopilot mode, you have a collision. Who is responsible? You loaned the car to a friend. Who's responsible? Identification. So literacy, the AI literacy is very important. And that was what was mentioned in the Prime Minister's speech in 2020 in Raise India. He talked about AI literacy being an important tool. And one of the reasons why that tool still continues not to have a very humongous presence, we're taking strides, is because of trust. The algorithmic trust, the trust in algorithms first. So I'll go back to one of the statements which was made is, India-US relationship. I think, for us to reap benefits of AI, synergies have to be looked into, and these synergies are very, very important. US has significant strength in chips and chip technology and chip design. And they had identified the problem with the way things were going in manufacturing sector way back in 2014-15, when the Obama administration blocked the Xenon chip exports to China. Now the problem there is the China, they don't have a clear policy on this. They have this military civil fusion. So if I'm selling you chips, who am I selling the chips? What is the end use? Now, why and where we stand to have the strength, I think that fusion does not exist to a great extent in Indian context. There is a separation. Not that separation allows to have meaningful relationships and also aid in technology transfer, in sharing of designs, in selling of those high-level chips. Now, that has really not precluded, by the way, The developments in China are so much so that they came up, despite the blockage on the chips, came up with a supercomputer in 2021, and they have an alternative to the CUDA, which the NVIDIA, which dominates the chip scenario in the Chinese context particularly. You know, the two companies, AMD and NVIDIA, have about 95 to 100% control on the Chinese market. Now, you know, in Indian context, with greater focus, all you have to do is just Google, and you can look up that there is so much focus on AI literacy. And also, there is a significant separation on the use of the chips, AI chips, that there is a humongous potential that can be tapped in Indian context. And there is a lot that we can do together because of this very beautiful and unique blend of rising AI literacy and a separation of civil and military institutions.
Professor Dheeraj, if I may insist on my question. My question was that you foresee that this wave of AI, at the trailing edge of it, we are going to see a new world order. Do you foresee that, or it is not that potent a thing that we have in front of us?
Well, at the expense of, you know, I had this discussion, it's a very difficult question to answer, but, you know, changing world order is a very difficult thing. I have made this statement before, and at the expense of sounding not so jingoistic, and, you know, at the expense of sounding a pragmatist, and, you know, I'm being a pragmatist. I think, you know, there is, in the near foreseeable future, decade or two, US is dominating, you know, a lot of this technology world. And it is foreseeable that they'll continue to do it, and they've already started to choke block a lot of things which are happening on the Chinese front, which was obviously a competition for them. Now for us, it's really a green field or a brown field, as may call it. For us, it's an open field. We benefit either way. We have, it's like a humongous market which is open. Even if we have an adoption rate of 1%, we'll see a great transformation. Now, change in the world order, I don't know, really. I mean, 85% of the global software, banking software, runs on one particular, you know, software of one company. How do we change the world order? You know, when we come to chips, I've already mentioned, even in China, two companies, NVIDIA, AMD, dominate the entire chip, you know, high-end chips. You know, these chips are so powerful, they can process 600, 700 gigabytes per second. These are very powerful chips of data. So, you know, that technology design resides. So, if I may take a safer option, you know, he mentioned three things. One was data. I think US has strength there. I think we can safely expect their dominance in that domain. Algorithms is our strength, you know. We are the people who can work hours and hours to create algorithms, and our technological workforce is unparalleled, I must tell you. Be it the FIFA World Cup event or be it any other event, you can just go back and look in the back doors, you will find our people there. So that's our strength. Where it comes to the manufacturing of the chips, I think it should be a joint effort where US would benefit equally as India would if a joint effort is made towards that, because this is a great environment, a stable, facilitating environment for manufacturing to take place. I hope I was able to give
thank
some.
you. Thank you so much. Pranjal, coming to you, maybe Professor Dheeraj answered my question to a large extent. But, you know, you are an independent thinker, you know. We are saying the world is seeing two prominent clusters in this game, right? There is one cluster that a part of which is sitting in this room, and there's another cluster which must be sitting in some other room right now discussing their cooperation. Now, you have had this unique vantage position of having seen the work of the task force of you know, B20 digital transformation. And you have also seen the expansion of G20, including the African nations now. How do you see this, you know, these new, you know, clusters which are emerging of cooperation? how do you, what is your view of that going forward?
So, Shukdesh, lots of points. Great discussion. I think we have to now look at competitiveness will not happen without data protection. Even on compute power, Ili, please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is even today, some of the chip makers are still dependent on some critical components to China, right? So you cannot completely on your own make a chip in US. Is that correct? So there goes your competitiveness. China can choke you. So the whole concept of competitiveness is also about self-reliance and being in control of the entire value chain. Today, open democratic market economies like ours do not have that control. So that answers also your question, Chuktej, on geopolitical change, world order change. Yes, as long as one country and a closed system is holding you by the neck, because certain supplies are not going to be there, you can keep screaming, you will not be able to say that you are, technologically independent and sovereign. Point 2 is about data. He talked a lot about data, so did Dilip and Dheeraj. But the point is, we ain't seen nothing yet. This is going to be the year for all of you who may not know, is Gen AI will be in your mobile phones. So think about the data that's going to be generating, point 1. Point 2 is, who's going to keep that data? How do we protect that data? How are you going to run LLMs or MLMs, as he said, on that data? What kind of design and structures are there? Are countries like US putting in the right structures to collaborate on that? We don't have those structures and policies because some of these changes are happening much faster than our ability to comprehend and devise a plan for those. So that, for me, is a scary thing, because if you talk about, Dheeraj, you talked about fake videos, think about fake videos on your phone. So this is going to be sitting on your phone. It doesn't go to cloud. It will generate answers and questions on your phone. Give it in the hands of even people like us who we think are very smart and intelligent about it, we get conned by it. Think about hundreds of millions of new people in Asia, in Africa, in India, who are going to get these devices with very powerful computational efforts. How are they going to manage it? So competitiveness, AI is such a strong tool that competitiveness has to be controlled. If you do not control the data, if you don't put the right kind of guardrails around it, it can just, your car can go off the cliff. So I think we need to really be very, very focused. So I think what I would say to you, Ili, is that countries like US and India have to come together, not just for each other, but for the larger open world, to be able to create the guardrails to ensure that this data of open societies is protected. If this is not protected, you're undermining civil society, you're also undermining entrepreneurship, and therefore you are undermining your national competitiveness.
Thank you, Pranjal. Ili, if I can come back to you and touch the other important point, which is largely about the national security. And in other words, let's touch the topic of military AI, right? We are seeing very high level of development, being tried by, different nations around the world. And, the weapon systems are now moving from large complex systems, which used to take decades to develop. From there, the world is shifting into new weapon systems, which have shorter development cycles, which become redundant faster, right? And the effectiveness, it's like a faster race of supremacy, right? In that regard, how do you see the movement on AI helping to build up national competitiveness?
Great question. I'd like to start by saying that I really agree with you, Pranjal, 100%. I think the partnership that could emerge on AI between the two countries could be beneficial for the rest of the world. Because I think the respect and the reputation that India has among, especially, countries in Global South, can be a huge vehicle for both countries to really provide an alternative model to the China model that they're providing already in these countries. So I 100% agree with you. And how we treat data, privacy, and civil liberties will be fundamentally different, obviously, than how China treats them and what they do with them. To your question on the AI for national security purposes, AI for military, I know this is near and dear to your previous career. I think we have to make two distinctions here. Number one is the AI we're talking right now is generative AI. So this is going to have probably a limited availability for weapon systems in the classic extent, in the classic sense of like, how do the auto-completion platforms link to the weapon systems? Will it help your ministry and our Pentagon probably in other mission sets? Absolutely. You know, in terms of writing, in terms of back office responsibilities, that our bureaucracy spend enormous resources, and you're talking admin, you're talking about what Dilip was saying earlier, you know, the company seeing the real value in using these systems. I think that's going to be really enormously helpful in sort of like back office responsibilities, admin, logistics, all those things. I think it also will be tremendously beneficial for the indications and warning mission sets, because these models, whether or not you're using it for satellite imagery, you know, analyzing enormous data sets, they can find things much, much faster than, you know, thousands of people if you put to look at image sets or data sets. And so I think the generative AI will have a huge probably potential for those things, less so on the weapon systems, I think, because I think that's an area you're looking at other AI models in the future. The one area that I wanted to highlight, but I'm blinking right now, is that wasn't raised so far, that I think it's a tsunami coming our way, is the whole issue of electric vehicles made in China. And we talked a little bit before of how it caught Europeans completely by surprise. But if you look at the last 10 years, we usually, and I'm talking about the United States, we were really, until the generative AI moment, we were caught in these surprise moments with the Chinese technologies. Think about 5G, you know. All of a sudden we woke up and most of the global, you know, digital infrastructure was built by 5G made in Huawei. You know, on our website there's a 5G global map, and it's primarily red. So we closed our eyes and allowed, you know, China to build a global digital infrastructure. On top of that, so this is a, you know, like infrastructure in terms of hardware. On top of that, they have built tremendous online platforms. And I think India here is much ahead of the United States, because you banned immediately some of them. But when you look at advanced surveillance systems, when you look at e-commerce, when you look at online banking in Alipay, Alibaba, all these things, you know, they were able to, and now in terms of the fashion and all these retailers in Temu, Shein, and all these other platforms, they are unimpededly operating globally. You were pretty firm in terms of, you know, banning them right off the bat, despite, you know, millions of users using it in India. Because the argument in America is there are 110 million Americans using TikTok, therefore it's difficult to ban it. But you banned it when WeChat, I think, had 400 million users.
You know, there is a new one, Ili, it's called Baby Bus.
Baby Bus?
Baby Bus is a new Chinese app which is scraping data of preteens, of minors.
Of course
because they have these kiddo games and they're getting data off them.
Yeah.
And we are planning to ban that as well. I mean, there's already applications in that. And we have actually stopped Chinese EV companies in India. We're forcing them to sell out. So.
Yeah. And so going back to how is the character and nature of warfare changing right now? It's changing because the warfare is being played in different domains. It's playing in cognitive domain with these online platforms. Whether or not they're utilizing it now to the maximum or not, look at the, you know, like the algorithm being used on TikTok and other Chinese platforms. How it's changing, how is the warfare changing in the battlefield? You could look at Ukraine. Ukraine has been dominated by primarily three concepts. Number one is many network-based operations, which came in a nature of drones. Look at how many drones are being used monthly in Ukraine, and then how Russia surged fast to close that gap. Second is the software platforms. The number one, the first battlefield that happened in Ukraine was probably space, cyber, trying to shut down the entire Ukrainian online space. And then the third one is really the human-machine teaming. If you look at the first-person, the first-person video drones, they are humanly operated. And so warfare is changing because the technologies are moving at the speed and scale unseen before. One data that I usually share is it took OpenAI 3 months to reach, I think, 300 million users. It took 100 million. It took Gmail 5 years to reach 100 million users. And so all these technologies and the competition with China is happening at the same time. And I hope we have time to talk about Chinese EVs, because I think what they're doing right now is deploying not a vehicle, but they're deploying a mobile system that in the future can be used for multiple things. Data scraping, multi-video training analysis, and all sorts of other nefarious and other reasons they can do it in the future. But I'll stop here.
But just on the point of defense and military security, attacking is not just about military security. You can attack what are known as critical infrastructure, including, like, say, his energy generating capacity. It can be struck down. That's war. That's an act of war. Earlier, you would bomb a factory or electricity thermal station. Today, you don't have to use bombs for that. So when you say about defense and security, Shukdev, it's actually not, the modern warfare will be AI warfare.
Yes, Pranjal, see, my view, why I asked that question was that when we look at, there is one common technology, but there are two very prominent usage. So one is the military usage and one is the non-military usage. Now, traditionally, what has been happening is that when you look at the evolution of technologies over the past few decades, normally the technologies are invented for defense purposes, and then when they become obsolete, then they move into a commercial application. Here, what is happening in this technology is that this technology has been developed far more into the commercial space first and is finding its application into military slightly later. So anyways, so TP, coming to you now, today's discussion and today's roundtable has been unique in a way that SCSP, for example, is a very unique kind of an organization which is set up, with a perspective of building competitiveness for the country. Now, if we want to take some learning from this organization, we as an Indian industry, and I'm asking you this question because you co-chair the AI forum in the Indian industry. How can the Indian industry work together with SCSP, right? And take some learnings as well as contribute so that we become two forces. We join hands and become one force to reckon with.
No, I think that's a great question, Shukdev. I think this is something we really need to take seriously, and I'll tell you why. Whatever we say about China, really, you have to admire them, right? On a positive note, you've got to admire what they've achieved over the last 10, 15 years. And it's not like all of us sitting all over the world didn't know what they were doing. They just, we knew what they were doing. It's just that they did it really quickly. But when I look back and I think about what makes them successful was a couple of things. Was the fact that the ability of government equals private sector equals public sector equals military. It's all one. And therefore, their ability to move capital, move technology, move systems across all the four is seamless. Whereas in our country, it doesn't work like that, Shukdev. We in industry do our own little gig. Academia does its own little thing. The government does its own little thing. And in democracies, it's tough to get everybody together. So I think we need to start thinking differently in terms of how do we integrate different silos that exist in our systems to bring them together on this cause. And I think this cause is big enough to bring everybody together. We in private sector don't have the kind of capital the Chinese allocated to AI research that we have, right? There is very little integration between private sector and academia, and that's something we should think about, is that can we work closer? We heard a few cases with IIT Chennai doing a little bit, then some other IIT doing a little bit, but there's no real national way to bring academia, private sector, government together to make all this happen? And is there a way that we can do? And in addition to that, then to your point, Shuktij, can we work with Lee and his organization and other organizations in the US to sort of work together on these programs? So I think it's a combination of capital, breaking silos, bringing a combined universe of thinking together to really take the lead on this.
Thanks, TP. Coming to Dilip. Dilip, you have this unique position of having seen the US industry evolve as well as the Indian industry evolve, and you have seen it from very close quarters. You know the differences between the two industries. But then when we look at the commonality of both being democracies, when we look at countries like China, how do you foresee that we could the two nations and two industries can work together to make this a stronger force?
Sure. Great question. I want to build off of something which I think many of the panelists have said, and Gilly, you spoke about it as well, is this unique complementing situation that we have tech and talent, right? And it's kind of like a match made in heaven, if I can put it in that manner, right? Where there is, and then the manner in which Dheeraj, you spoke about the need for trust, right? And the fact that the underpinning of both the societies is democracy and and elected governments and so forth. So I think it's fertile grounds for a collaborative setting, which is not just at a point in time, but something which can withstand the test of time, coming into the years. The manner in which we've seen inbound investment originating from US rise over the last half a decade or so has been very encouraging, right? And what we are increasingly finding is many of Indian origin firms, and these are not the tech firms alone, these are good old-fashioned manufacturers who are now setting up bases in the US, right? That's rising up, and that is quite interesting, right? It is not uncommon for us to find ourselves in dialogues. There's one that's going to happen this week, Shuktij, right? Where we are talking about working with a client of ours here in India, right? About proving some use cases which they then want to roll out in their plants in the US, right? So the point that I'm trying to make over here is that if countries need to collaborate, firms need to collaborate with each other, people need to collaborate, academic institutes, standards bodies, and I see a lot of these dots already getting connected, right? And the ones that were not are getting connected at an ever-increasing pace, right? So I just wanted to leave you with a couple of those data points, which I witness as a part of my daily interactions, right? And the number of visitors we are hosting, not just from my own organization, but many of our clients, who are coming in here, just prospecting what more could they do. U.S. firms, right? In terms of evaluating India, right? Some of them have put up. One of our clients, this was a renewables company, First Solar. They just inaugurated a plant in Chennai, which is exactly at the same scale at which they've built a plant in Ohio, in the US, right? And they're one of the many where we are seeing the scale really increase, right? And what they are doing here now, which was not the case previously, is approaching the opportunity in India at the same pace at which they would be doing for their manufacturing activities. That's one end of the business spectrum that I'm more familiar with, probably, so bear with me there. But I'm seeing that the connect points are getting stitched up at an increasingly fast pace, and that makes for very fertile grounds for a long-term collaborative setting. Yeah.
Thank you, Dilip. Professor Dheeraj, if I may come to you, a lot of, when you look at countries who have developed faster than others, there's a big role that the academic institutes have played. in working collaboratively with the industry and with the society. You know, in my own case, I did research for around 8 years on disruptive innovation for military applications. And I found that a couple of cases in US and a couple of cases in Israel and in Japan and in Europe. You know, there has been this discussion for last 2 decades, at least I can say, that academia and industry should work together. Of late, we have started seeing that the IIMs and the IITs are now collaborating and working with the Indian industry, and there are projects which are being driven in that direction. As somebody who's heading one of the largest IIMs in the country, how do you see this going forward, and what is it from the industry that we can work together to make this impact faster and broader?
It is absolutely imperative. It's very essential that there is collaboration and a greater engagement between the academe, industry, in policy formation, execution, development. There is a lot that can be done and a lot that needs to be done. I will illustrate this with an example. I think SCSP is an example of that. They're already here. There are numerous other institutions which contribute actively. The environment is facilitating, and I'd go to the extent of making a sweeping statement. I think it's a significant rise of US post the Second World War was, to an extent, and again it's a multivariate equation, and one of the key predictors is their engagement with the academic world. Dr. Henry Kissinger, who Americans believe to be one of the pioneers in the thinking process, and then resulting in what was called a young Turk generation, Frank McNamara and company. They were all people who had come out of academe. More recently, you would see many individuals from the academe who come and actively participate. Now, why this is needed is because, you see, as an academic, there is the primary responsibility is to keep asking questions and keep answering the whys. Why is very important, because when you have a why, it gives you, the real mission to do something. As Nietzsche would say, anybody who has a why to live can almost persevere with any how. So why is very important, and we keep providing those whys. And it is imperative that going forward, there is even a deeper engagement with the academic world in terms of actually executing some of these very, very important facets of AI. Longitudinal studies have been the cornerstone of progression in the medical field in the US, in the pharmaceutical field in the US. Today, large amount of research which comes out of US drives some of our choices. As a matter of fact, I would go to the extent of saying that today the type of tie that you are wearing is determined by somebody sitting in Kellogg school, who would probably be discerning what would be the right kind, or whether the suit should be double-breasted or single-breasted, whether you should part your hair in the middle or on the left side, or you should be wearing checks or plaids, so even these mundane choices are determined. The consumer sovereignty, is determined by people who are thinking and understanding human behavior and consumer behavior. I'll just close with just very short 30 seconds. There's a beautiful program. We talked about it. Again, people don't get remembered. Johnson was the president, the US president after John F. Kennedy. He started this youth program. And that was the beginning of creating structures for engagement of youth. Even today, after almost 60 years, summer employment of the people is predicated on that program, which was initiated in 60s, because he found out that we need about 2 million people who will be in school and would need summer employment. And in 60s, they went up from engagement of about 13-14% to about 50% engagement of these young people in working. I don't understand today, we're taking strides towards AI. I don't really see a sense of urgency. So what I would expect is for us to start talking about the urgency of this very important field of AI and its implications on our society, and that can be hastened if there is a greater collaboration between academia and industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Pranjal, finally to you. So your comments on, how can this cooperation that has been developing between the two countries, how can we make this stronger and more effective?
I think we'll have to collaborate. There'll have to be a sovereign part, there'll have to be a collaborative part. Today, I think every country wants to create its own LLM, right? So India is now, you must have read in reports that Krutrim has come up as a first Gen AI unicorn in the country, launched by Bhavish, who is also the founder of Ola Cabs and also Ola EVs. And there was a study recently which talked about how many countries are creating their own Gen AI LLM models. Because what's also going to happen is that each LLM has to be focused on the community which is there. An LLM which is, an algorithm which is learned on US demographics is not going to work in India. It will not be efficient, it will not be productive. Similarly, within India, we'll have to have different types of LLMs for each region, the diversity that we have. For example, you can't have one common LLM or a Gen AI model for Europe because there are linguistic differences, there are cultural differences, there are behavioral differences. So I see that as a very important step going ahead. And there I think industry, government and academia have to come together with collaboration with like-minded countries. So here data sharing will be important. So if we talk about collaboration, Shuktej, is how do you share data in a responsible manner? How do you collaborate and getting the right kind of insights which can be deployed for different communities? I think those are the key steps that we need to work on. I don't see it right now, but perhaps at a conceptual stage, but we need to urgently, and I second what Dheeraj said, that there has to be some urgency on this front.
Thank you, Pranjal. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, we've had a long discussion between the panel, but we are also deeply honored to have many distinguished people with us. May I request if anybody would want to make a statement, else I may invite some of the prominent people here. Charu, you would want to?
Fascinating discussion, thank you. I'm going to connect with many of you at dinner. But just listening to all of you speak, I think obviously national competitiveness seems to be the theme of discussion, but I think there's a deeper set of conversations which many of you touched upon, which is what does the free world do when you have something of the scale of this disruption, right? Like I think people talked about the rate of diffusion of this tech is the fastest humankind has witnessed, right? 0 to 100 million in 3 months is massive. I don't think any other piece of technology has seen that kind of adoption. So, and I think Satya talks about this, he was at Davos talking about the rate of diffusion where the work of double PhDs reaches an Indian farmer in a matter of weeks. I mean, this is massive stuff. So I just a quick intro about myself. I work at Microsoft. I build Azure, the world's computer. I work on tech that powers OpenAI. So we have a very deep interest in this topic. So the question I have, or probably perhaps Yili for you and perhaps Shuktej, right, is as you think about this collaborative approach, it needs to be grounded in AI principles, right? I think we really need to align on what those principles are. I think the free world demands us to think about inclusion, about privacy, about, you've talked about sovereignty, you talked about all these aspects. But I think we now need to ground them in things that we can touch and feel and not just words. So I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on how you have principles that are implementable in industries, right? I think that is probably a pretty good first step. I'd love to kind of hear your point of view.
No, thank you. Great question. And I think you're the living example of the collaboration between two countries. So I think everyone is struggling with how do you create some kind of a regulatory framework around this issue. When you look at what we are doing in the United States, it took almost a year for the White House to come up with the White House EO. It's probably a very lengthy document, but that is only one piece of the puzzle because the EU only tasks departments and agencies to look at what they're doing right now, update regulatory policies and whatnot. So that's only one piece of the puzzle, and you probably know our Congress right now is working on drafting a legislation on how to regulate AI. On the EU, I mean, we talked before the panel, but I'm a firm believer that EU has completely missed the boat in this space. They've become the world's superpower in regulation. I fear that because this will cost all of us. You know, they are trading partner for us. Most of them are natural allies and partners on the security space. But if Europe is not in the same page with the rest of the democratic world, then it will hinder us in sort of like this competition against China. And I think it will further sort of like downgrade their tech capabilities because I just don't believe regulation has ever led to innovation. And so I think I think first of all, each of the country has to identify independently what the principles are for that country, because I think, as Pranat said, even in India, every state, probably every region will have to have a different approach to these things. And so I think in the United States, you see maybe at the state level, people have been adopting different policies for AI. So I believe the first step is, and this is probably the most difficult one, is how do you create some kind of regulatory framework on a technology that is moving so fast? I think I will tell you from my experience, the most challenging thing in our system is how do you bring public and private sector together around this issue? Because we have certain limitations, ethical, legal, you name it, because I think government alone cannot do this. This is moving so fast that if you don't involve private sector continuously in the process, you will try to regulate something that has already left the train station a couple of months earlier. So I think the first step is, you know, regulating it at the national level. And then I think with other like-minded nations, democratic nations, trying to create a framework of what does that mean. At the bilateral level, obviously we will have different principles. But I think with India, you know, big picture, the alignment is there. Both democratic countries, you know, freedom of expression, freedom of media, human rights, all these things are already aligned. It's just finding that what does it mean for this particular technology? And then how does that unleash that cooperation, you know, the partnership between the two countries. But I think right now, probably 2024 is going to be the year in which we will, United States, try to figure out how you can regulate this on a national level.
I think it can't be regulation first and then innovation later. We all agree that they have to be in lockstep. So perhaps starting off with data interoperability standards, there's privacy regulation. I think there's many approaches. I mean, so we really need to, I think, act with speed. This thing is disrupting at a rate that we can't even put our fingers on. We're not able to produce enough GPUs to run these models, frankly.
I agree with you, and I would also say, like, this really cannot happen just with government bureaucrats alone. That's why you need this kind of a process, which we really have a difficulty finding in the United States, on how you bring these two communities together to, you know, work hand in hand to go after these issues.
If I may add to it, you know, Charu, the way I look at it, maybe more at a philosophical level, you know, humankind is currently being driven by a set of technologies to find new partners and to iron out the differences and the obstacles faster and faster and faster. And, you know, typically when you look at what is your liability, for a long period of time, people in India and China used to look at their population as their biggest liability. Then China started doing things differently, and then the population started becoming an asset, right? And then so here now with the new world scenario, the polarization between China and countries, and then US and India and the countries. Now here, if you look at a deeper level, eventually it is a game between cost and speed, right? Why China has been scaring everybody is because they can produce and sell things at a cost at which you can't even produce. That's what they have used to spread themselves around the world. And why I am able to answer your question is because in a stealth mode, I went and worked in a Chinese firm for 2 years because I wanted to find out that what is making these guys work. The other thing is the speed. Now, when we come to AI, there are obvious trends that US and India individually have, right? When you look at development of a new model or a new technology, one part is the design of it, and the second part of it is testing it in the lab and then testing it on the ground. Now that testing part makes the whole thing costlier and slow, right? Now, India and US, in my view, can actually collaborate so that we bring the testing by the demographics here to develop these things faster and make them cheaper by scale. So, I mean, your question is very pertinent and there's no clear answer right now. But then I think each of us understand that we are being pushed by the circumstances to do everything that we are doing faster and faster. And whatever we are doing currently needs to be, made faster. So that's what I think about it. Yes. Okay. So we have Amit Dubey between us. Amit is a leading authority on cybersecurity in India. He's a published author, very well-known person. Amit, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for inviting me here and curating such a wonderful panel. I really enjoyed this entire discussion. I have 2 cents to share. First of all, I really want to bring this MIT report, which was based on the carbon footprint generated because of AI models. And they have quoted that an average AI model would generate close to 1 million pound of carbon, which is equivalent to a US car generating in 10 years. So it is actually impacting Earth in a negative way, and unregulated use of AI will definitely burden Earth eventually. They have also given multiple comparisons of different AI models available, which is used by different bodies to generate LLMs and all, and how much carbon they are generating. Do you think we need a regulation, first of all, of using AI for selective purpose, not each and every place? Because right now it is bullish. We want to replace everything through AI because we think it is much more effective or efficient. But I think it is not efficient with respect to the carbon or the electricity or the processing speed which it is consuming. Eventually it will burden our Earth. And the second question that I have, that before we got ChatGPT launched, we already had people working on Fraud GPT and Worm GPT. So, because I have been investigating crime cases since last many years, I have learned, whatever I have learned through criminals. And I truly believe criminals are innovators. They always teach us something new whenever we catch them, a new modus operandi or a new vulnerability which has been exploited and got unnoticed before. So my point is, do we have any such measurement to keep? Because I'm just very active on dark web and other such places. People are really creating wonderful tools through Gen AI, which is for negative purpose, of course, but there's no regulation there as well. So these are the 2 concerns which I think I would like to bring over here in discussion so anybody can discuss. And I would like to see your perspective from US because...
Amit, can you clarify measurement of what you said?
Carbon footprint. Carbon footprint, which is generated because of AI models.
I think
have you gone through the MIT report? Because I'm referring an MIT report.
I haven't read that, but what I know is the GPU uses 4 times the power that a CPU does. So, that itself tells you that, the energy consumption, if it's 4x...
is also because of the number of parameters and the data required to train AI model. And it is actually overloading, consuming lots of energy, and that is something which they have actually given in a classified report, very beautiful report.
I also read, Microsoft is actually experimenting with putting its data center modules underwater to manage the heat, so that's also another experiment on
Yes.
mitigating the impact.
Can I?
Yes.
I think, I've gone through the report, so I'll just with that vantage point.
Please.
The impact, the carbon impact of some of these models are, has to be extrapolated on its usage, on frequency of usage. So it's not a linear equation, you see. With every individual added, there is a multiplier. There is a lag with each user, It does not essentially, multiply into as you keep adding users. So that's one. Second, in terms of, multiplier or measurement, I believe that they have to fine-tune these algorithms, and I think a lot of work needs to be done. In, again, management research, we say, what is a good model? What is the best model, rather? What is the best model? The best model is parsimonious model. You see, because whenever you add a factor or a variable, you are expecting that variable to explain an outcome or the variance in that outcome. So the mind has to be applied whether the introduction of a new variable and its explanatory power warrants its presence or not. Oftentimes it does not. So from a scientific research standpoint, fine-tuning of those models and reaching an optimal model and then measuring its impact would be a way of going about it, rather than, a vanilla is how they have done it. I mean, vanilla model and its impact. That's my 2 cents.
So you are discarding MIT report?
No. So you see, I'm not. You see, in the absence of, first of all, what gets measured gets done. You have to have some starting point. I mean, you can't, you have to have some basis. They've given you a basis. I think future researchers will fine-tune and, make it, I would say, more predictive as well as more descriptive in terms of, fine-tuning the process that they have undertaken and thereby realizing and sharpening the outcomes which should arise. So the measurement will get better. I mean, it's a starting step. I mean, it's a wonderful step. I think
no, what about the current use of AI? See, future, we know that it will be optimized, it will be better, but people are so bullish. They are just, every day we listen, people are creating new LLMs, I think 700 plus LLMs in US and then in India itself. So are we not doing justice with the right use of AI? And that is my point.
No, you're right. You remember I started out, I said, technopoly. We are allowing technology to drive us.
Correct.
That's where I think a lot of these responsibility things come in. States have to be responsible.
So that's what I think
the state has to be
should
responsible.
come through regulations or some guidelines.
First of all, state. Second, corporations. They have to have, basic principles of doing this in an ethical manner.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're just extracting. I mean, it's another way of putting your hand on, getting somebody's hand on your wallet. I mean, that's not how things, you're absolutely right. So the primary responsibility would be states and then the corporations to fine-tune.
Can I add Can I just add 2 points?
Yeah, please.
And quickly. Number one is I think the competition between the top companies will try to find solutions on 2 things. Number one is energy. And I think everybody now is looking for alternative sources of energy. Our project is looking at fusion because I really believe that with AI, where we are, the AI as a source of innovation for other emerging technologies, we are at that point that fusion might be one of the paths in which we solve some of the energy issues. I think the test last year in the United States showcases maybe a promise in fusion, but I think the competition among the top companies will look for alternatives way of energy because I think it is not going to be sustainable to come up to GPT-5s and 6s and 7s. So that's one. And the second portion is the training data, because I think they've extrapolated most of the data that exists right now everywhere. So I think the hunt now is for what is the next wave of data. I think the audiovisual is probably going to be that in the near term, to bring these models to the next level. The current model has the knowledge of a 5-year-old kid. And so I think getting to the 6-year-old and 7-year-old, you need more data. And I think all these companies are going to look at the next data set. To your second point about criminals, I think Mark Andreessen has a really good saying. He says, every new technology gets first adopted by techno-optimists, then crooks, and further down the road by regulators. And so I think this year, what I think it will define 2024 is the path of the two paths that exist right now: the proprietary model of large language models and the open source. And I think the jury is still out there is which model is going to succeed. My impression in the last 3 days here in India, there's a big support here for the open source model, right? But I think the fastest path for criminals to get a hold of these is open source model right now. And so I think this year we will see probably that field being much more firmed up in terms of is the future with the proprietary models, or you will have this explosion of open source models, and wherever that leads us into, you know, a wild west, the next wave of innovation and whatnot.
Just
May I? Yeah. Yeah, please. I'm on the left to all of you. Yeah. So, thank you.
The lights are coming.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Can you please introduce yourself? And
Yeah,
ask the question?
sure. I'm Professor Charu Malhotra. I teach e-governance, digital transformation, and cybersecurity at a premier government setup called as Indian Institute of Public Administration. And I've been there for last 32 years, training the senior government officers, including defense officers. And I'm on the panel of World Bank, ADB, and other multilateral organizations. That's not the point, but thanks for asking. Okay, so can I sit down? Yeah, thank you. So I'll be more comfortable. My gray cells are more active when I'm sitting in my own self. Okay, so I'll just pick up 2-3 points. I heard all of you. First and foremost is, let us believe that after G20 and other such summits, that we are all here to build trust in technology. That's the bottom line of the entire discussion. It's not competitiveness, it is competitiveness, but the main thing of regulating AI is that the inclusive nature of technology should be felt by everybody. So for that, I would say that we don't want to stop technology, or we don't want to put an end to innovations, but we need to inculcate safeguards. And these safeguards will come from all the stakeholders. And these stakeholders, I call them, as a professor, I can't help it, as 4C model. So 4C model is, I have cross-country, which all of us are doing right away. We have countries, which you called as state. So then we have corporates, which include my startups also. And last but not the least, let's not forget communities. So the power of collective in regulating AI governance is redundant in case the end beneficiary themselves do not vocalize the context and the needs and the aspirations they have. Because if I want AI as a safe, trusted tool, I need to make sure that the end beneficiary participates. Second thing I personally believe is that the era of LLM is almost over. And we have to move together towards SLMs. Like it is data guzzler, it's energy guzzler, LLM, and it serves little purpose for building up verticals on it. So for verticals, I don't need just APIs and a huge parameter model. I need to have more application-specific data and APIs regulating only that vertical. So for that, we need to have alternative sources of energies, I agree, but we should also explore neuromorphic techniques and quantum brain inspired technologies to look into this. India has already worked a lot on alternative forms of technology to propel IT. I worked with IIT Delhi, so I know I'm saying with a lot of confidence that we have Gobar gas plants and other such run machines which run more effectively without any power. Power means bijli here. Bijli in Hindi means electricity for English. So what I'm trying to say is that India as a whole presents many mechanisms, but all these mechanisms, as the organizer himself said, needs to be scaled up. And that is where we need companies to pitch in. So regulation is not to stifle, but regulation is to reassure. Once we understand that, I think we'll be on the right track. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. May I invite Dr. Lavnish Channa from SAP to make a statement or a question? Can you get the mic, please?
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for such an interesting discussion. I think all of us have learned that AI is an area with mouth-watering opportunities, but with eye-watering challenges. So that, all of us have learned. But at the same time, we are viewing AI as revolutionary, but we need to view it as evolutionary. So I had 2 points to the panel to raise and probably get your views. One, from a company perspective, and this is a question maybe TP or Dilip, any one of you can take it, have we reached a stage where rather than looking AI as a vertical and focusing on development, we now focus on embedding as a horizontal and start utilizing the benefits that we were all looking? In short, are we reaching the stage of AI as a service, from a service provider and actually utilizing, and that use case replication probably will answer many of the points that we discussed. That was one. My second point is at national and geopolitical level, and maybe you can take it. We have seen diversity in approaches to AI. We have seen the AI for innovation approach by US, AI for regulation approach by EU, AI for control approach by China, and where you are sitting, AI for development approach by India and Asia. Now, there is a huge diversity in approaches and obviously there is something it needs to learn from each other. And if GDPR is an example of EU taking the lead in regulation, many Asian countries did follow that to come out with their privacy regulations. So even if we have a view that it actually is a blocker to innovation, but at the same time, the EU regulations have provided always a very good reference start for regulations elsewhere. Let's give it to them. Now, in our own Asia, Singapore came out with this AI Verify Foundation, which has a government industry partnership to actually come out with governance frameworks. They were the first ones now releasing the generative AI governance model. Now, the point that I have is, at the same time, if you look at the IP, and somebody spoke about technology ownership for competitiveness, two countries currently hold more patents than the rest of the world put together. And there is an opportunity that there is a chance that the divide that we were talking about may get further wider and wider. So the question that I had is, do you see the geopolitical scenarios emerging where there will be an urge and a need to replicate these experiences across countries, and what shape could that platform take so that the divide part that we are getting worried on actually gets addressed? So these are the 2 points that I had.
No, thanks so much, Lavnish, for that question. I think the first one, I'll take the first one. The second one, I'm sure the other folks on the panel with a better perspective. AI as a service. Sam Altman, somebody asked Sam Altman in Davos a question that when can we see generative AI driving cars, right? And his answer was a long, long time away, because he felt that from a safety perspective, security perspective, I think you said that the technology is still as where a 4-year-old is. So I think there's a long way to go. This is just a start, and we have a long way to go. However, putting aside the more complex stuff like driving a car using generative AI, I think it's going to happen. The question is when, but I still think it's some time away. I'll give you one or two quick instances to share with you why I say that. One of the world's largest oil and gas companies, the CEO mentioned to me, he says, you know what, TP, in my oil and gas business, I know everything. When my compressor fails, when my turbine fails, I know everything, how much production there is on an hourly basis, daily basis, how much oil is coming out of the ground in Africa versus the United States. But he had invested $20 billion in building wind and solar farms around the world, right? I guess he's cleaning his soul. But the point he made to me was that I have no idea how my $20 billion worth of wind and solar farms are operating, right? Now, that's not to say that his guy in the United States knows how his assets are operating. The guy in India knows, but he, as a CEO of a big European oil and gas company, has no idea. So I started thinking to myself, okay, what if we give him the power of generative AI? So we have all the machine data, vibration, temperature, pressure from all these turbines. And we created this safe box. And we put into the box SAP data he's getting, maintenance data, financial data, and we put it all into that box. And we created a CEO persona, and we said, okay, now play with it. So he typed out there, tell me what my power generation was in my US assets. And immediately yesterday, and it came up, why are 3 turbines not working? And it said the gearboxes have failed. Why did these gearboxes fail? The pressure on the oil sump went down. So he said, have we seen that before? And it said, yeah, 5 years ago, we saw a similar problem with this turbine. So he got really excited, but that's as simple as it gets. And I think the journey from here onwards is only going to accelerate. So I think it's going to happen. But it may not even happen in big cases. I think the MSME sector in the world can largely benefit from this. A small little company that's actually selling high-end equipment in retail, he came to me, MSME company, and he said, listen, this will make my life so much simpler. I don't have the vast marketing teams. If I can access all this data, in real time, what's happening in my little company. So I think those more low-hanging fruits will happen. And I think eventually it'll happen, but I think there's a long way to go to, while the CEO was playing with this, to test whether the results are coming, how real they are, what the variances are, so there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. One last quick point. It's less I'm finding about the algorithms and the Gen AI than the cleaning of the data. It took us a long time to clean that data, tag the data, ingest the data, make it look clean before we could give this guy the ability to play with it. So that's the other area we need to figure out, because for humans to do this, it cannot be humans doing this forever. It's just the data is too vast to have humans doing it. So I don't know how to crack that yet.
Just quickly to answer your question, I think, the UK AI Summit probably was the first attempt to somehow bring all these relevant countries under one room and see if there's a common denominator for some kind of I would not call it a global regulation, because I don't think we will ever have that in AI. So I think you have the next iteration of that summit happening in Korea later in May, and then the other one in France. So I think that will continue until they reach some kind of a mutual agreement on some wave tops, principles and whatnot. To your point, I think there are 3, maybe 4 countries emerging going forward. You have something that's never going to take hold, which is the EU regulation. Maybe countries will pick and choose from that document something, but I think that document, for the purposes of helping a European startup industry, is not going to happen. Then you have the China model, which I think beyond the China borders, maybe 1 or 2 other countries around the world will replicate. But China market in itself can withhold, its own regulatory space. And then I think you have countries in between that are trying to find the right way between innovation and regulation. And I think who cracks that code first, that's going to be the champion. Now, our rhetoric in the United States is that we will find that in between regulation and innovation. Honestly, that sounds really good, but how do you put it in practice? I think India is probably in between the US and the UK, because I think the UK has decided to be a much more laissez-faire when it comes to regulating. And I think India is navigating somewhere between United States and UK. And I think if you crack it first, maybe you'll be the winners. But I think the next 2 years, probably we will all swim in this space of how do you find that sweet spot, that Goldilocks moment in which you go oh, okay, this is what I meant by innovation and a balanced regulation.
Yeah, okay.
On that sweet spot specifically, I want to call out an India example, which I think is super powerful. This whole notion of the India stack, digital public goods, it's powerful, to your point, right? Establishing trust with the global south. I mean, who would thought that we'd have a single identity system for 1.4 billion humans on the planet, or that UPI transactions at that scale would run at population scale. So perhaps it's a very interesting, I'd say, set of principles. When you go talk to these folks who've built India Stack, they've really thought through composability, interoperability in a very fundamental platform way. So perhaps it actually gives you a good blueprint to think about.
I think, so look, the discourse right now in the United States is much more risk aversion. When you look at the regulatory approach, if you look at the rhetoric, it's much more risk approach. So if you demonstrate the contrary here by showcasing, that this can be good and with positive outcomes, I think you can win the narrative.
Yeah, look at that, right? Just take MOSIP. It's an open source project that's taking identity to Nigeria. Did we ever think that we would, and it's tech enabled, tech is still at the bottom of it, but the point being, it is that interoperability, it is, definitely there's a lot more implications with capitalist economies. I acknowledge that IP matters. We're part of a company that IP does matter. But I think embracing open source, thinking about interoperability, composability, there's some very fundamental principles that are worth, I think, looking at.
Thank you, Charu. May I invite Mr. Sandeep Girotra? We are honored to have you here. He's a very senior leader from telecom and infrastructure industry. Sandeep, if you would like to make any comments.
Thank you, Shuktij. So for me, this has been an absorbing session and learning session primarily first. But what I've clearly been thinking of for a while is, and I think this goes to you probably, Pranjal, as the most relevant question, is when it comes to the e-governance and taking the government to the citizen and democratizing all the data which we have, using the resources which we have at the disposal of the government, etc. So do we think that this can start to lift the countries or the people up the economic ladder, the artificial intelligence and the capability of it and the democratization of it, which we are looking at?
So I think yes, the answer clearly is yes, and some of it has been displayed. If you look at some of the numbers of 500 million bank accounts being created using the Jam Trinity is quite fantastic. But I have my concerns. I think that still the interoperability between government departments and agencies is still not in place. If I can, put two of these jargons together. Where I think some departments, both at the national level and also at the state level. So if you remember the whole concept of a chief digital officer for smart cities, which was, it's almost a 7-8-year-old project, was there. But one of the challenges, I remember talking to some of them, is that the sanitation department does not share the data with the traffic department, does not share the data with, so they're all generating data. This put the systems in place to generate data, but there's also this, data squatting which is going on. So you also need these new structures of governance which have to break away from the existing ones for this data to flow seamlessly. You have new concepts coming up where there are, to be fair, there are very strong attempts to create data lakes across within sectors and across and between sectors. So the National Digital Health Mission itself is a huge challenge, just to make sure that all information about a patient's health is in a common protocol which can be used to do further studies, and if not, at least benefit the patient in a anonymized manner. So I think there is a lot of effort which is going on, but in terms of the scale that we have to deal with, Sandeep, I think it is a huge challenge, but India has to deal with it. I think the biggest word that I use for India is scale. Whatever you can do at scale will be successful. But here I think government departments have to figure out a completely new structure of governance where it is perhaps a data-first approach.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your high engagement and comments and questions. In the interest of time, may I request each of the panelists to make their closing statements, starting with you, Ili. In fact, I also wanted to take this opportunity, since we discussed how do we take our co-working forward and make it more effective. We have a good representation from the Indian industry here. We have the co-chair, TP, co-chair of the AI Forum of Indian Industry. How do we take this forward? Is there a way we can, participate with you guys, work with you and kind of take some learnings as well as contribute some of the stuff that we can help out? Are there any things that you have planned where we can participate and work together?
Well, first of all, I want to thank CII for organizing this amazing event. I want to thank my co-panelists here because I think the conversation was awesome. I was telling my team that you have to pay attention because even in the green room, the conversation was richful. We have a website. For those of you that want to stay in touch, please reach out, scsp.ai. But to your point, Shakti, so I thought that 2024 is going to be a really challenging year to organize anything in Washington, given that we have elections. You have elections as well, but the political environment in Washington is much more polarized right now to do what we do every year, which is Joe here organizes a summit where we get the leaders from private sector, the White House, Congress to speak at our summit. So this year we're going to do something else. I'm organizing for the first time with SCSP AI Expo for National Competitiveness. So this is a big expo at our convention center where we expect 7,000 people to walk, see technologies, interact with people, with companies. We will showcase demos on all these critical technologies that I think we have to invest to stay ahead. I think nobody has ever done it before in Washington because technology resides in our nation in both East and West Coast. So we want to bring those companies to DC, but also we want to bring departments and agencies to see the potential of these technologies. Part of the reason why we wanted to do the CII is because I know the importance you have in the Indian industry space. And so we invite any company that is interested to showcase their capability at our expo. You can go through the website, submit your request, because I think this is one place in which we can really, I think there are probably a handful of countries globally that have the reach, speed, and scale to do what we have to do in the next couple of years. And I think India probably is at the top. And so part of the reason why I'm here is really to reach out to your companies and say, like, come showcase at the expo, bring the Indian industry, Indian company, because I think that's how we move this relationship forward. Government will always, pursue the government-to-government path, but I think private sector can move much faster in a more agile way. But thank you again for having me, and I look forward to future collaboration.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you. So, taking that discussion forward to you, TP, now, because you chair our AI forum. As Ali says, they are doing an expo in May in DC, and we can perhaps, take this discussion forward and take a delegation there from the industry, in case you think that to be proper. Also, at the same time, may I also inform that, CII is organizing a global AI summit on 26th of February. So it's an open invitation to all distinguished guests here and the panelists. Of course, the official invitations will follow. So TP, your views on how do we work together? My individual perspective is that, if there are a few things that are remarkable about what SCSP has been doing. And we in India do not have a setup like this. Why don't we just copy and paste it?
I cannot agree with you more, Shakti. I think that's what we should do.
Ask ChatGPT.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
So your closing comments today for...
Yeah. No, first of all, Ili, thanks so much. I think this has all been thought-provoking, and thanks so much for Dilip, Dheeraj, Pranjal, for your perspectives as well. I think looking forward to taking these discussions forward. I think one of the big takeaways, Ili, that you mentioned is that we really need to get all the various sectors, whether it's academia, whether it's government, whether it's private sector, to come together on this really important cause. So with that, thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to you, Shukdev.
Thank you. Thank you, TP. Dilip, over to you. Fantastic views that we got, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation. I mean, you are somebody who's kind of directly dealing with the, as I call it, the problem of the nation, right? Adoption of AI has to be made rapid and fast and more effective. So your closing comments for the session.
Sure. First of all, it was absolutely a pleasure and honor to be here, and thanks for the great insights. It was such a vibrant dialogue, so I really enjoyed the evening. A couple of things from my side. I think the future is promising. Scary, I think what he said about mouth-watering and eye-watering, that I think in just one phrase captured the essence of what lies ahead. You got to just muscle our way through all the challenges because there's just so much of promise. And what is the alternative? I don't think there is anything, which is in the alternative space. So we just must harness the power of this technology and make it to deliver value and overcome, and cut through the complexity that we have. I think it's great to see the close proximity at a government-to-government level, and of course across businesses and such. So, I take away with me a lot of enthusiasm, and thanks for inviting me over. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilip. Professor Dheeraj, what a pleasure it is to have you here. I'm so grateful that you took out time from your institute. You drove down to this place in time, and it is very heartening to see the kind of participation from academia like this. Your closing comments for the evening, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks to you, and thank you to your team who reached out and were very persuasive. And I think it's an opportunity for us to deliberate. And I'll repeat. I think somehow we don't have the sense of urgency in this matter, and we need a sense of urgency. And that sense of urgency will only come when we have a working team in place on how to develop these structures, which we've been talking about. Because without the rules of engagement, terms of reference, without these structures, it just doesn't tell us where we're going and how we're going to impact lives of people and also generate some value, both in terms of business and in terms of society. So I want to thank, it's been a great experience listening to all of you, and my 2 cents is, I think we could do a lot more, and going forward, I think we should be able to come up with some outcomes.
Thank you, Professor Dheeraj. One thing I can promise you is that you will soon find a CII team in your office once we get an appointment for discussion further on that. Pranjal, to you.
Thank you. I'll close with the suggestion, which is that one thing which will really work, and I appeal to the co-chair as well, if we can put together, and perhaps IIM Rohtak can collaborate, is put together examples and case studies of what has worked across sectors, across government initiatives of how AI has improved competitiveness. Small projects, pilot projects, if you bring them together where people can learn and see how it has worked, everybody can then learn to apply for their own context. Sometimes things are very theoretical, but what I have tried to do in my books and columns is to showcase what has worked, and that helps people relate to it. So I'll close on that suggestion.
Thank you, Pranjal. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we come to close of this program. What a fantastic panel we had. A big round of applause for them.
Thank you so much. Our sincere appreciation to each one of you for contributing to the success of this enriching roundtable on AI for national competitiveness. The discussions sparked today hold the potential to drive collaboration, endeavors, and inspire innovative solutions. We would like to present a small memento to our esteemed panelists. May I request Dr. Rao to kindly present the memento to Yali. Thank you. To Mr. T.P. Chopra. To Professor Dheeraj Sharma. To Mr. Dilip Sani. And to Pranjal Sharma, please. I would like to request Mr. Dilip Sani to kindly present the memento to Dr. Rao as well. Thank you once again. Your active participation has been invaluable, and we eagerly look forward to continuing these conversations at Networking and Reception. May I now invite you to join us for dinner and use the opportunity to network. Thank you so much.